Hello, welcome back to Fireside Gaming. My name is Ben, and today we're going to continue on with Suzerain. Last time we left off, we attended Bernard Sirks' funeral, we looked into our possible foreign policy options, as well as began to work on our constitutional reforms. So, we're just going to pick up where we left off here. Looks like we've got a couple of reports, as well as one newspaper. So let's go start with the newspaper. Let's see, from the Radical, we got... down here somewhere. There we go. WPB protests electoral bill. Growing discontent over the past electoral campaign finance bill, which has excluded public funding for parties that aren't able to enter the Grand National Assembly, has reached a boiling point. All Workers' Party Bludia officials and members went out in protests around the country. Strong voices of support came from the Labor Union of Sordland and People's Freedom and Justice Party, calling the bill unfair for most parties and an attack on our democratic principles. The new bill means that the WPB lost half of their total party funding, and since they couldn't pass the high election threshold of 10% to enter the Assembly, aren't eligible at all to receive any public election funding for the 1957 elections. The WPB leader said that the workers' struggle continues, and they're willing to explore other options to be able to represent the hundreds of thousands of people that voted for them. For now, the struggle continues. President Rain and the ESP establishment are actively seeking to suppress the political representation in this country. I mean, I won't argue that. Alright, let's take a look at our reports up here. From Fogsland. Fogsland urges calm. Chancellor Hagel has released a statement through official channels urging calm on the Rumberg-Sordland dispute. General Secretary has also mentioned the climbing tensions should immediately be de-escalated to protect peace and prosperity in Eastern Makopa. Right, and up there it is, Rumberg. Rumberg condemns closure. Queen of Rumberg, Beatrice Livingston, has released a statement this morning to publicly condemn the closure of Sordland's consulate in Dome. Thornburg also accused Sordland of increasing tensions in the region. I mean, they started it. Super juvenile response, but I don't care. Alright, and from Conradt, promising industrial potential. The mayor of Conradt, Chris Shaw, reports that the decision to start the construction of the L1 high-speed railway project has caused industrial investors all over the country to invest money in regions near the city. The mayor is hopeful that the completion of the project would result in substantial economic growth in Conradt. Nice. Alright, and in Whole Sword, L1 construction plans started by Underhall. Underhall Construction has reported that preparatory work for the L1 railway has already started, including clearing land and transporting equipment. Construction of the railway will be starting in the next months from Whole Sword. Fantastic. Alright, for our next story beat, meeting with Chief Justice Hawker. The administration had been working day and night on the overwhelming amount of issues that are facing the country. The department sent several documents which required my signature so they could start working on the new decisions that were taken. After I signed dozens of them, I closed my eyes to relax for a moment. Another long day. Even though I really wished to leave the palace for the day, Lucien earlier told me that the Chief Justice wanted to speak to me. We planned to meet in my office in 30 minutes. I waited for him, wondering what subject he would raise. I stretched out my arms and looked out the window. Thousands of shimmering lights in the whole sword skyline were mesmerizing. Suddenly, I heard a knock on the door. It was Lucien.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Lucien.
I'm sorry that I couldn't explain the situation to you in detail earlier, sir. The Chief Justice insisted on seeing you this evening. I do not know what he has to say, but it will probably be about the new constitution. He'll be coming shortly with Judge Mr. Garachi to the meeting. We shouldn't take them lightly.
I think he's here to test the waters.
I agree. They'll probably try to get you on their side. We should...
There were 3 knocks at the door. Lucien checked his watch. She was rather worried. Olivia opened the doors. Chief Justice Orso Hawker and Judge Heron Garachi entered the room.
Good evening, Mr. President. It's great to see you.
Evening. Welcome, Justice Garachi and Chief Justice Hawker.
Good to see you indeed.
Orso gestured at the seat on the sofa. At the sofa in the office. That was bad.
May I?
Let's have a seat, gentlemen. We all took our seats on 2 opposite sofas, made ourselves comfortable. How are your first couple of months, Mr. President? I hope you're faring well. I'm doing well. No need to worry, Mr. Garachi. That's great to hear, Mr. President. We also think you're doing a good job so far. Considering all that's happening around us with the shootings near the palace and soldiers on our borders, he let out a deep sigh. It's a troubling time.
We appreciate your concerns. So, you probably know why we are here.
Please, enlighten us, Mr. Hawker.
We know you're working on a new constitution. The Supreme Court does not approve of this. With all due respect, the Constitution needs to be updated, sir. I am sure you're well aware of the public demand and our circumstances.
And the public demanded to give more powers to the President? Spare me the lecture. I know you have different ideas. Even if your proposal passes the Assembly, I'll make sure it does not pass the Supreme Court. That much is clear. So he came here to threaten us.
How is that a threat, Mr. President? I merely stated my position.
There is no threat here, Mr. President. Mr. President, you seem to be only partially informed about the current situation. Please let us explain the reasons of our stance. Oh? Please explain. We are protecting the Constitution because it works, Mr. President. It is efficient and gives you the authority to lead the nation with swift decisions. Sorting out more important problems and threats that we should face right now instead of nitpicking about some paragraphs of the Constitution. We have a potential war within our borders. Orso signaled Heron with his hand to let him speak instead.
Mr. President, I know that you are a busy man, so I will make this quick. We all know that soldier security forces found stashes of Brombergian weaponry in the hideouts of Bludish separatists. K-74s are roaming inside Solomon at this moment. As much as Bromberg poses a direct threat, now it's clear that they are also intervening in our country and weaponizing our minorities against us. It's not unprecedented to think that the Blues will start the terror again with the new toys. Not to mention the fights that broke out between the left and right wing after the shooting of Bernard Circus. Communists are rising with the support of United Cantona, and the chaos is imminent for Solon. And sadly, we don't see the administration taking the necessary precautions. You said you would not focus on military during your term. Under current circumstances, that cannot be tolerated at any cost.
Mr. Hawker, the court has no jurisdiction over these matters.
Aren't we all part of the state, Mr. President? We are all responsible if Solon fails to overcome these threats. But regardless of that, are you also aware that the armed Bludish separatists have direct connections with the Workers' Party of Bludia?
I mean, everybody knows that.
You know what that means. Do you remember the vote of the Workers' Party in the last election? What's this all about? The only reason they're not in the Assembly is because of the electoral threshold. They've gotten quite big. They are clearly getting outside help, and their connections to the paramilitary Bludish force cannot be denied. All of a sudden, the reformers are trying to decrease the electoral threshold so that the Bludish separatists can be legitimized in the Assembly to achieve their aims of independence.
That's too dramatic.
Say what you will, Mr. President, I am stating the obvious, but I wish the only issues with Bludish terrorists in Nuremberg.
Their reformers suggested changes would also bring the communists who are backed by United Cantona into the Assembly. Do you see the pattern yet? I apologize, gentlemen, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is not a conspiracy theory. Haven't you been briefed by a security team? Maybe you should suspect them as well.
We should take the necessary measurements against communist Bludish plots, as well as increasing our military budget as against possible conflict with Bromberg.
And, of course, not fall into the traps of the reformers by listening to their demands. They're clearly plotting to weaken the president and the whole administration in order to exploit the situation.
Which brings us to some very important information that we have. It's definitely something you need to hear, and it can change absolutely everything. With all due respect, Mr. President, I think this is getting slightly ridiculous.
Please explain, Mr. Hawker.
The person in question is Mr. Franc himself, the leader of the reformists. We have enough information to infer that he has ties with Acacia. Acacia is aggressively growing their influence around the world, and now we have Mr. Richter coming up with these ridiculous demands for a new constitution, which is a chaotic period in Solon. All the pieces seem to fit perfectly. That's why the Supreme Court will be doing what it takes to stop these reforms and preserve the Constitution. Would you know that Mr. Richter has ties to Acacia?
Mr. Galan, we all know he's been at Acacia many times because it's been documented, but what do you think if he's been making hidden flights to the country?
He's hiding his flights to Acacia?
He was.
He has been spotted in a hotel in Acacia last year, where they held the Conference of Economic Development of Baltic Regions. Right around that time, he started to influence the masses into believing that our constitution is the reason for everything bad. His trip was not documented, nor was he an official guest of the conference. We believe he had a meeting with President Walker behind closed doors. I also had a couple more photos of him that were taken in Acacia in different cities. One is from a couple months back. Again, none of it is documented. He also attended another event in Lesbia last week. The Acacian Minister of Foreign Affairs was there too.
How did you find out about this?
Many sources were already following his leads for quite some time, Mr. President. I cannot give away their identities, but I can give you the evidence.
He handed me a small file. It contained official documents from the Swordfish Beauregard with highlighted dates that showed no trace of Franz Richter's name. There were clear photos of him that were taken in the conference in Arcasia, as well as remarks by lesbian Arcasian citizens who claimed to have seen him with Arcasian businessmen around the same dates. There's also an official transcript of one of his speeches where he claimed to be in Benfey on the dates of the conference in Arcasia where he was spotted. Lucian skimmed through the documents with skepticism, which slowly turned into surprise.
These seem to be real. Of course they're real, Mr. Gallard. They seem to suggest that Arcasia is behind the reformers. The demands will only benefit Arcasia. They want us to have a weaker administration while we face all these threats. This is clearly a plot against Solomon. I bet Rumberg is part of their plan too. This cannot be a coincidence that they are weaponizing our minorities against us around the same time. Now you understand the reasons for our current stance, and also our suspicions about your advisors. Clearly have not given you this vital information.
Lucian gave him a sharp look.
We appreciate the information, Mr. Harker, but I advise against jumping to conclusions right away. We still need to check the information. There is not much to think or check. This is clearly an emergency. In such cases, the Constitution gives the President the right to use his emergency powers. If we work together, you can be sure that the Supreme Court will not block your declaration of emergency.
You want me to declare an emergency?
Of course, we cannot wait for the process of the Assembly to take care of these issues. You must exercise your presidential powers for a fast and effective solution. Which means you might need to suspend parts of the Constitution to give more authority to our security forces to deal with these issues. We must officially investigate Mr. Richter as well. You can devise a strong security decree based on Articles 57 and 58, which gives the President the right to suspend parts of the Constitution to deal with national security threats. You can directly bypass the Assembly in such a situation. The only thing you need is the Supreme Court to allow the emergency to be declared, and you have our word on that.
Sir, I think this is going a bit too far. We shouldn't escalate things so fast.
Mr. President, why don't we talk in private? It's only two of us. We can devise a plan together. I know how we can use the Constitution to our advantage. It'd be more effective if Mr. Gallard and Mr. Garachi leave the room before we discuss it.
Sir, I advise against it. Not sure what to do here. Let me pull my guide up. Alright, so the guide says to just tell him to fuck off, so that's what we're gonna do. I'm sorry to say that we won't be cooperating, Mr. Hawker.
Even though you're aware of our national security threats?
You're making a big mistake, Mr. President. We will not allow you to succeed. Gentlemen, I think it's about time to end this meeting.
Thank you for having us, Mr. President. Have a good evening.
They both left the room without saying anything else.
That was not good. They clearly tried to threaten you.
We need to take care of them.
Also, we'll be doing whatever it takes to damage you. We need to be careful. There's so many old guard sympathizers in our party. Can't let them divide our party. You will definitely try.
After a short evaluation of the situation in our hands, Lucian left me in the presidential office. It was obvious that the old guards would be my main rivals in the near future. Brilliant. Alright. Looks like we're at the end of this chapter, or at least this churn anyway. So, let's check out the newspaper. From the Lockhaven Times, Hawker in Maroon Palace. Chief Justice Orso Hawker has been spotted entering the Maroon Palace. Our sources are intrigued by the timing of this visit that is happening right after the increased conversations around the so-called democratic reform. Historically, Mr. Hawker usually does not frequent the palace unless for official business, and this was certainly an unplanned visit. Clearly, there must be something he wants out of this. Our speculation is that this has something to do with the reforms. More to come on this later. Very nice. Alright, well, let's continue on to the next churn here. Trials of Democracy. Alright, wow, we've got a lot of reports and newspaper articles here. So let's just start with reports. Over here to Boren. Communist books banned in Boren. Local residents gathered thousands of books that they claimed to be spreading communist and millennialist propaganda at the Century Park in Boren and set the books on fire. Aggressive slogans starting the Red Youth, the Workers' Party Bloody, and the Communist Party of Sortland were shouted. Youth groups from local party offices of the USP and NFP also joined in with the burning. The fire department was dispatched and the protesters dispersed on their own. Nice, okay. Earlier, Young Swords and NFP flags burned. Massive counter-protests against Young Swords, led by a local politician known to be aligned with the Red Youth, resulted in many injuries and property damage. Subsequently, Young Sword's National Front Party flags were burned, which caused tensions to escalate. Local police dispersed the protesters by sundown. Alright, from Sarna, Balloonish Resistance and Sanctuaries. Security units have arrested 3 priests at 2 different Nerdy sanctuaries in Sarna after finding links to insurgent activities. The report came from an elderly man who wanted to pray in peace, but instead found himself invited to join the Balloonish Freedom Front by a state-sanctioned priest. Further instances indicate that the BFF is pushing for a local recruitment drive in different sanctuaries across the region. Interesting, okay. Lockhaven, recession hits farmers again. As per the latest news from Lockhaven, the farming industry has taken another hit as a result of the recession. There are reports that 16% of all wheat in Lockhaven is rotting in barns due to a lack of buyers. Farmers are requesting additional funds from the government to survive the year. And Narbel, lack of hospitals. The mayor of Narbel has reported that their hospitals are overburdened and they are unable to respond to the needs of the citizens, complaining about months-long waiting lists for terminally ill patients. On top of the capacity issues, it was also noted that facilities are still largely using outdated technology. Nice. Alright. That looks like all the reports. Actually, let's check here. Nope. Alright, so it's the newspapers. Swordland today. School poisoning in Rubel. Police have arrested the principal of a high school in Rubel in southern Bergia, where 12 students died after eating a free meal laced with pesticide. The students, aged between 15 and 17, died after eating a lunch of local dish zabla, cooked at the school in a poverty-stricken city. Police have started the investigation to solve the mystery of how the pesticide ended up in the food. Interesting, okay. Alright, we've got 2 here from the Radical. First up is time for women to stand up. The women in Swordland have always been under pressure by the unequal society and the system of discrimination that was built by old men who only knew about war, said Katarina Horton in a women's rally that was held in Holzord yesterday. Swordish League of Women is organizing a number of rallies across Swordland to bring the change Swordland desperately needs. It's time for Swordland to realize that we have to respect every individual regardless of their sex and strive to become an advanced civilization. Women have long been pushed to the corners of the social and political life. To address this change, a new campaign has started all over Swordland to establish a framework for women's rights. Swordish League of Women is organizing rallies with support from Minister of Education Ciara Walda and Member of Assembly Katarina Horton. Everybody is equal according to the Swordish Constitution. There are no protections against discriminations, which only reinforces the inequality in practice, said Walda in a press conference. This movement must be supported by all Swordish women as well as men. We need to bring change now. We can do it. And questioning Solst education. The newly unveiled SIPA Education Performance Report unveiled a sad reality about Swordland's abysmal status in comparison to many countries. Swordland was rated 39th out of the 68 nations that were assessed by the OMAC organization. The primary gauge of the quality of education is made from a sample of 16-year-olds from each nation and their capacity in fields like mathematics, history, chemistry, and many others. One of the key issues was seen as a strong focus on history and citizenship classes, leaving little time for scientific fields. Minister Walda often mentioned the gaps in the system in her assembly debates before she joined the cabinet. This is also supported by one of our editors, a professor from Holsword State, who had long been critical of the situation in secondary education. The SIPA report reveals the damning truth that Solst education based on the principles of statism, nationalism, republicanism poisons the bright minds of our children. We need to rid the system from the poison that is ideological indoctrination and let our future generations think for themselves. Alright, The Economist. Upcoming government budget changes. As the top economy experts in the country, we've been watching the upcoming changes to the government budget very closely. President Anton Rein's first internal economical challenge lies ahead, and we will see if he can prove his capabilities as a leader who can think ahead. The potential ramifications of diverting the funding of certain governmental branches has always been a point of contention for any leader, and is no different for this case. We'll see if President Rein can hold on to the promises he's given during the election campaign. And last but not least, from Geopolitico, Van Horten blames Volkswagen for the missing fishing vessel. On Tuesday morning, Agnolia's Prime Minister Van Horten has made a statement denouncing Volkswagen for the missing vessel, hull number ARV-0238. Our dutiful Coast Guards have rescued a crew member of the missing vessel. Through his statement, we've learned the ship's unfortunate end was none other than the Volkslandian Navy. However, the Prime Minister has refused to disclose the surviving crew member due to fear of an assassination attempt from Volkswagen to cover up their hostility, as the minister later claimed. Interesting. Alright. So, let's go have a barbecue with our son, apparently. It was a Sunday afternoon, my first break from work in what felt like years, and the weather couldn't have been more perfect. Trying to keep my mind off the upheaval sparked by the circus assassination, I lit the backyard grill. Monica and Diana were out shopping for craft supplies, and I'd given the staff the day off. It was just myself and Franc at home. I wasn't sure how he felt about me at that moment, but I did know how he felt about barbecued ribs. Our cook had left some marinating in the refrigerator. Sure enough, as soon as Franc glimpsed the grill and meat, he stepped outside to join me. Come to spend some quality time with your old man, have you? Sure, if you can spare a few minutes on your busy schedule. I'm sorry, I know I haven't been around very often lately, but I'm happy to see you now. It's okay, I know you've got the most stressful job in the country, and you've got to feed your family on top of it all. We both chuckled. I turned to tend to the fire. Here, let me try. He grabbed the fan and started quickly waving it over the coals. The fire roared to life. He turned to look at me with a grin on his face, as if he were expecting praise. Not bad, son, not bad. Thank you, sir. It's in our utmost interest to fulfill our duties with precision. Grilling shall commence in exactly 1 minute and 32 seconds. That was a spot-on impersonation of Lucien. We looked at each other for a second, then burst out laughing. I realized my throat was parched. There's a 6-pack of beer in the kitchen. Why don't you grab us a couple beers? He looked at me in disbelief. You mean I can... But Mom told me... He stopped himself, quickly ran inside, and returned with 2 beers. We cracked them open, clinked the bottles, and gazed out at the city skyline. For a moment, my thoughts flashed back to my childhood and my relationship with my own father. My father was a hard-working man, always had our best interests in mind, or at least that's what he always said. But he had a temper, would lash out at my mother in fights I could hear from my bedroom. At the time I was Franc's age, we seldom spoke. Now that I was the president, I was facing more stress than my father ever had. I'd have to work hard not to take my frustrations out on my family. Dad, can I ask you something? Yeah, go on. It's just, I feel like there's so much you've been hiding from me, about your past and about what's going on right now. Like at dinner that night after the ball, you told me everything's out of control, but it wasn't. I know it happened in the 20s. We learned all about it in school. Now, with protests and riots, it's gonna be the same thing. Dad, is there gonna be civil war in Swordland? I certainly hope not. He let out a sigh. But what was it like back then? Uncle Peter said the two of you went through a lot. I'm not a kid anymore, you can tell me. Before I could gather my thoughts, the familiar images started flashing before my eyes. Images of soldiers advancing toward me and my friends, weapons drawn, people I knew, friends and neighbors, being dragged through the streets and murdered in alleyways, and that little girl's face. Let's see, do I want to talk to him about it? I know I did last time. Alright, I guess let's go and talk to him about it. Those were dark times. It seems like it. But you're nearly a grown man. Let's talk about it. Franc leaned forward in his chair, his eyes wide. Tell him about the coup, why not? It's time to tell him about the coup of 1927. I was barely older than you are now, studying law at Holsworth State University. I was a freshman, excited and young. I had just left the classroom to go back home as I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the campus gates. As they got closer, I realized they were military camouflage trucks and tanks carrying hundreds of soldiers. Same soldiers that were supposed to protect Swordland citizens pointing their guns at us. They immediately took control of the facilities. One of my friends asked what was going on and was arrested immediately. More people got angry and gathered in protest. Franc kept listening, a shocked look on his face. Let's just go ahead and scar him. I was there with the protesters as they declared martial law. We marched towards them. They threatened to use force, but we stood our ground. So they started beating anyone they saw, including me. Physical wounds took a few weeks to heal, but the mental scars have stayed with me to this day. I was still one of the lucky ones. Some of my friends were shot, many more were arrested. I can't forget the screams to this day. Franc leaned back in his chair, his shoulders slumped heavily. It was time to tell him about the Civil War. It was right after I met your mother. We had both joined the student council to push for change after the coup of 27. Eventually, I became convinced I wasn't doing enough, so I joined the Young Swords. Then, one night it happened. 2 different factions in the army, one of them led by Fascist General Luderin, and the other by Socialist General Ricard, started fighting against each other. It was a bloodbath. Nowhere was safe. Franc shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. So, we organized a protest one day against Ricard. We're fed up with the army toying with the country again. I paused for a moment before continuing. It was horrible. They were waiting for us. Soldiers started beating and shooting at everyone and plowing their tanks into the crowd. Amid the chaos, there's this girl. I never forgot her face. I tried to save her, but I couldn't reach her in time. Franc's face had grown pale. He turned his eyes away from me. Alright, that's probably enough for today. It's okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked you about it. I know I don't understand how easy my life is sometimes. One more thing, though. I know you joined the Young Swords back then. Do you mind if I ask why? I had to survive somehow in that environment, and I made a choice. Franc raised his eyebrows, his curiosity still not satisfied, but sensing my reluctance go on, he simply nodded. Sorry for bombarding you with questions. I know I complain sometimes, but my problem's nothing compared to what you went through. I'm still here to listen to them, no matter what they are. Before Franc could say anything else, I heard the front door unlock. Gianna and Monica's voices and the sounds of rustling shopping bags filled the house. Alright, I'll be upstairs till dinner. Frank went in and dashed upstairs. I took a long sip from my beer, looking at the city and the now setting sun. I hoped that talking to Frank about my past had been the right decision. Part of me had felt as if some sort of burden had been lifted. But I had the same nightmares again that night. Nice. Alright. That's kind of an awkward place to stop, but I think I'm going to do so anyway. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.